Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My name is Aldo Matza, percussionist, drummer, and artistic director of Kosa Music, inviting you to join in conversation with friends, artists, professionals, and experts in our music world. And remember to subscribe so you may receive notices of new and upcoming episodes. Today, I have the great opportunity and the honor to have a friend who I've seen over the years perform. He's been teacher, and I'm really, really happy we finally got him on the show and to share his journey with us. Mr. Henrique Almedia. No, De Almedia. Let me say this correctly. Henrique De Almedia. Was that correct?
Henrique De Almedia.
Oh, Henrique De Almedia. That's the musician. Hey, that I love that. That's like, the music this way, but it's actually this way. It's we call it slanted music. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Nice. Sometimes in Brazilian music, it's very much like where I was born in Calabria, Calabrese. Calabrese, the language. I mean, people say it's something, but they are languages. They're oral languages. Same thing. They're sideways.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, thanks so much for being on with me today. I have a question before we go off on the the journey and those decisions we've made. How did it start for you? Where did you start with music? What was that spark that got you going in the first place?
We can only do how far we remember, right? A lot of what I remember was actually from my mom telling me, right? Because I was too young. But I know one thing. From a very early age, I did show interested in drums and hitting things. But what I remember in my memory is being really little in Brazil. And I remember having a toy drums of some sort, but was with real coffee skin. I don't know if it was a snare drum or tom-tom. I don't remember. But I remember this, that if you put it on the sun, the head would stretch. And I love playing the drums with my face right above it and feeling the waves, the sound waves. I do remember that. And I also remember, now be mindful, I'm not playing drums. This is what I enjoy doing it. Hitting, there is no rhythm involved or anything like that. And the other thing, not to date myself here, I'm old enough that when I was a kid in Brazil, little small radios was very popular. People working class everybody had a little small radio, especially to listen to news and soccer games and stuff. And those little speakers are not very big. There's no bass. And I remember singing the sound of drums as a kid, as it sounded on the radio, right? So I remember those two things, and I had to be 3 or 4 years old.
Nice. And then you studied officially or in a school after that at some point?
Well, there was a big chunk of time between 3 and about 8 where I used to, according to my mom, I used to go in the kitchen and get wood spoons and put pots and pans on the floor and play pots and pans. And then I progressed to Brazil is very green. I am from Recife, Brazil. It's tropical, so every house has plants everywhere, and there is stands to put plants on it. Plant pots hold to be upright, and I used to get buckets and put on this thing so it's not on the floor. And I played a lot like that. And of course, birthday parties, I always ask for toy drums, which I would break them very easily. And then as I got older, my dad got my brother and I 2 drums. I think was a little bass drum and a marching snare drum, and they made of metal. I never forget that. It was not a toy, It was cheap, but was made of like a real drum. And I never forget that day. So my brother and I jammed a lot. And as I got a little older, before any lessons, I convinced my dad to buy me a hi-hat, which I remember he was very upset that day because we go to the store. I had to do something to earn this because what I had is a snare drum on a plant stand and this little bass drum. So I played to records, but it's not a drum set. So I
Right.
had to do everything with my hands, but I needed a hi-hat. And I never forget how upset he was because I forgot to tell him with the hi hat, you have to buy the stand as well. That was on different costs. And I remember arguing with him. I was 8 years old or 9 years old. You didn't tell me I have to buy a hi hat stand. I said, of course, you can't just have the cymbal. So now I had a hi hat, a snare, and this bass drum. And I played a lot with records, no band yet. And then at the age of 10, that's when I start going to a school called Academia Zenil de Maria to get drum set private lessons, although I didn't have a drum set yet. But that's what happens between, show interested and I've been playing drums and liking drums enough that my parents finally took me to a little local school to have drum lessons there. And then stuff happens after that, but that's the beginning of it.
Yeah. And then I know, of course, that you came to the States, and then you studied at Berkeley, right, to begin that part of your journey. What made you decide to do that? You were
Well,
playing professionally before that?
yeah, can I back up a little bit? So
Sure.
so this when I was 10 years old, I start to go to this school, which is really good. It was like a big house on the beach. We live on the beach, and this whole family, Zenilde Maria, this guy had a bunch of sisters, and one played piano, the other played drums, they had a bunch of ladies that taught music, and they had accordion stuff anyway. So they hired uh, uh, somebody to organize as I school, but it was really their big house. And I start taking drum lessons with this teacher. It was the best thing in the beginning because he really didn't taught me rudiments or reading or anything. All he taught me was grooves. This is a bossa nova, this is a bolero, this is a waltz, and we play with songs. So after 1 year, I could actually play songs. I didn't know how to read, didn't have technique, but I was playing uh, grooves, and this is 1975, right? I was born in 65. So if you said play the bossa nova, I would be chat, chat, play a bolero, play a waltz, play a jazz beat, whatever. So I start playing around with people, and then I start playing with bands. And then my dad was a chemical engineer. He didn't want me to be a musician, my father, in the
Of course.
beginning.
Of
So
course.
he tried to scare me by enroll me at the Pernambuco is the state, the conservatory. Dig that name, conservatory. And you go in there and you have, solfege, harmony. And I go to my first drum lesson. And the guy teaching, he was the principal percussionist for the symphony, and was very intimidated because I was all excited, right? I'm now 11 years old or 12, whatever. And I look at the drums. He goes, don't even look at the drums. It's 1 year on the pad. Technique, rudiments. So half of the guys just quit. So I did the conservatory. And then when I was there, I started playing with the teachers. I kind of have, those kids that has talent and really love the drums. So my friends were the age of my parents. So on the weekends, when my friends would come over, some were older than my parents, because it's like a saxophone player or a bass player. And then I start playing illegally on restaurants. And my dad used to. My first paying gig, I was at the conservatory on a theory class or harmony class, and this guy walks in panicking, telling the teacher his drummer can't make it later to the steakhouse gig if he has somebody to recommend, and they couldn't find anybody. My teacher said, this kid is reading now, and he plays, he knows all the beats, whatever. He looked at me and he hired me, and I had to tell my dad to go drive me to this. I don't know if you're familiar with rodizio houses, the steak houses where they bring the
The
And
Brazilian steakhouses. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and it was cool because these people don't want the band to play for too long because they don't want people to stay there and eating, right? Because it's a buffet. Like you pay one fee and you eat as much steak as you want. So the music was kind of a 5 to 7 or something. It was very early. So my dad drove there. That's my first gig is to play with this organ teacher. Is organ, bass, and a singer. It's like a trio, and I lasted there for a while, almost a year, but they scream at me all the time because I didn't know what I was doing. The bass player would go, "You'll be on the verse, I'll be on the ride." No, no, hi hat, and then it would be like the B section. No, switch now. It's like learning on the job. But that's how it started, and then I started playing with bands, got better. My dad gave me a drum set for my birthday. And then the big break was one of the local guys used to write music to a lot of famous singers. So I went to Rio or São Paulo to record with an artist named Don Troncho. And the producer was a big star in Brazil, Alceu Valença. So I end up, because of those connections, I end up playing with Alceu Valença, which is a mega star in Brazil. I got that gig in '84, I believe. Before that, I played with Francis Haim, which is the uh, pianist that writes music with Tom Jobim, doing theater gigs. So I was playing a lot in Brazil. I became really good at playing, and people start recommending me. And then I moved to Rio de Janeiro in the mid '80s to tour the world with Alceu Valença. He has many, many hits. You can Google on YouTube. We play in soccer stadiums. So the motto of back on the day was you go on tour, you record. We are with RCA Records. You record a LP,
Right.
and then the company, that was another whole different era. There was no internet, there was no iTunes, right? It's a whole, and the label paid for a tour around the country and around the world to promote the record sales and ticket sales. And so I was touring very young. I was not even 21, and I was touring, and we played a lot in Paris, Zenith, Olympia, Carnegie Hall, a bunch of jazz festivals. And then one year I visit Boston and I freaked out. I saw Berklee. And that's when and plus I played with Gilberto Gil, Alceu Valença, Luis Gonzaga, and Alceu Valença's house was full of people visiting, Javan, Milton Nascimento,
Wow.
the creme de la creme. And on the Leblon, they had a corner. It's a historical place where they have four restaurants, and that's all the writers and movie makers and composers. And it was like a very flowing exchange of cultural information between singers and musicians. And I was on the middle of that. And then, to his upset, I decided to leave Brazil and go to Berklee College of Music because I had a lot of passion for jazz. My dad listened to a lot of jazz. I started to study the history of the drums. And then some of my favorite players when I was in high school was Vinny Colaiuta, Steve Smith, Tony Williams, and I start researching where did they go. They go to Berklee. They studied with Alan Dawson. They studied with Gary Chaffee. So that was the reason for me to come to the U.S. right after high school. So mid '80s, I go to Boston, and that's when the Berklee thing starts.
Nice, nice. Yeah, and the thing is that Berkeley at the time they were so far ahead of the whole curve, the learning curve of non-classical music, which was by then, I mean, it was huge, but nobody's really paying attention. But Berkeley did, and they gathered some great teachers. I mean, Gary Burton and Gary Chaffee that you're talking about. I had a few lessons with him once. He came up here. And yeah, in those days, the institutions didn't quite get it, so Berkeley was way ahead, and they've always kept that up, which is fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah, one interesting thing that because I know you are an expert on that area, when I got to Berkeley, just a side note, there was no nobody really knew Afro-Cuban music, Brazilian music, West African music. So it was primarily, those movies from the 70s.
Yes.
I love the 70s, like SWAT and all those movies. Uh, the when I hear those soundtracks from the movies on the 70s, the kind of funk big band or whatever, uh, Bewitched and what's the other one? All those
I Love
movies.
Lucy, the Flintstones.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The
Yes.
my degrees in jazz composition, and those are the techniques that you learn there. Drop twos up. There was like if you go to a big band, and I played a lot of big bands. It says Latin,
Oh,
like it's not like that anymore. But that's the way it was.
no.
Like you be playing a chart, and the bass is a biome, but the horns is playing. It was a mix, but they fix all that now. But that was a different era.
Yes.
And but one thing that I want to inspire anybody who's listened to this, I had a dream to go to Berklee, and I remember the first letter I was rejected the first time because I had no harmonic. It was different to be accepted back in the day. It was a little different because every major, regardless of the major, you had to take 2 or 3 semesters of piano.
Right.
So I had no knowledge of harmony and ear training, none of that, or nothing. So I was rejected. Then I went to take piano lessons. Then I was rejected again because you have to have some kind of a music theory background, and I didn't. And the third time, I didn't know how to speak English. Yeah, but he's life for you. He's life for you. The guy that was denied 3 times, and instead of crying and say, "Okay, I'll quit," we'll get to that on our conversation. I became, I was nominated. The top professor of the percussion department in the model, and I designed more courses for the department, and I taught more students than anybody else. That's the guy who they said no 3 times. So don't
Of course.
quit.
Yeah. Well, that was the
Don't quit.
And always you never quit because that next time will be the right one, and that's the guy who's going to make it. Is the guy who was not rejected. When it's too easy, right? When it's too easy,
Yeah, Dr. John Wood, my teacher, right?
Yes, yeah,
He's an amazing mentor, and I called him. This is out of order here. Just it's connected to what we're saying, but it's not chronological to our
right.
conversation here. But I remember when I asked him, basically, uh, I did a recording and I sent to John Rams, and I didn't know he was a chairman. That he got the chairmanship, and I sent a recording with me and Steve Hunt. Steve Hunt is one of the best jazz fusion keyboardists in the world, right? He's playing with Alan Holdsworth and Vijay Donato, those guys. And John Ramsey got all excited about this, and he said, "Man, you gotta leave." I was in the Air Force band at the time. Leave the Air Force and come to New York. And I went, "Haha, do you have a job for me?" He said, "Actually, Mike Mangini just abruptly quit to go play with Dream Theater, and there is a open. I can't hire you. There's a process, but you should apply." That's how this started. And
Yes.
on the topic of not quit, do not quit. So I started the application process. I didn't think I had a chance, but I told Dr. Wooten, "Can you write a letter for me?" He said, "No, I'm not going to write a letter because this position is already taken." And instead of going, "Okay, thanks," no, I said, "Write it anyway. Just write it. Later, everybody, I got the gig." But that's another. Don't pay attention to what people's telling you, man, because was 80 applicants, then 60, 50, 15, 5 finalists. Was me, Billy's Joe's drummer, the drummer of The Voice. Who else was the drummer for John McLaughlin, and a lady that I don't know who she is from California. But anyway, this is just on the thematic in my journey. Like since it's about the journey, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the greatest thing is don't give up your dreams, and change the word from dreams to goals, your goals, and then be organized, be planning, I mean, with a reason, right? I have not a lot of talents, and I kind of know the areas that I'm not good at it. And I was lucky to have a lot of people be honest with me.
Yeah, but those things that you feel are not as strong as the others, you keep those up, and you maintain yourself, and then you excel in those things that really interest you. Unstoppable for yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So
speaking of the Berkeley, John Ramsey, a little side note here. You weren't there, but um, I rarely applied for a job or of any kind. Except I was an adjunct at McGill. At one point teaching
yeah,
percussion and drums there, and especially the percussion for education majors. At one point, that was nice because I really I love teaching about as much as performing. And then what I went on with that. And then later on, when Dean Anderson was leaving his position, someone contacted me and said, Aldo, you should apply for this position, the
yeah.
chair
You'd be great there.
of the percussion department. And I said, you know, I can't get a job. I was kidding. I can't get a job. I've worked all my life. But I said, you know what? That would be cool because we were doing the whole COSA thing for years. I
You'd
have
be perfect. You'd be perfect for it.
Yeah. So I
Yeah,
said, you know what? I think it would be really nice because a lot of the people that were working with us were from Berkeley. Oscar Stagnaro was there,
yep, yep.
as our rhythm section. And I said, I know everybody. Kenwood Denard. I actually studied with
Yeah,
Kenwood Denard when
yeah.
I used to go
Good,
to New York from
good friend
Montreal.
of mine. Yeah,
I
yeah.
said, I know everybody. And I have the kind of position where I was a rock drummer. Then I have my degrees in classical percussion, work with repercussion all over the world. So I know that.
That's right. You'd be perfect. Yeah,
Now, all of it, I understand the language. And I said, that would be really nice to bring it in a institution situation,
yeah,
just share what I have and then like
yeah.
be part of a bigger team. So I said, oh, I may never get it, but let's try it. And then
Yeah.
they called me for the interview. So I was actually, I think, one of the last five. And John
Do you
John was
know
John was one of
John
them.
Ramsey? Good. Oh, I didn't know you on that thing, but when John retired, I called Dr. Wooten. I totally forgot about you, but do you know why you'd be perfect for that gig? Since I was there for 12 years, you'd be perfect for different reasons. I want people to hear this because a lot of people that are not on the inside, they don't know, right? It's not only because you play all instruments, almost. I don't know, you play everything, right? That gives you a different perspective. That's why I love your show. I listen to your show a lot and I learn a lot. As a matter of fact, I was on a walk this morning. And I'm listening to one of the episodes, and
Thank you.
one thing that is a challenge for people like you and I is because there's so much stuff on the internet. It's an open door,
Yes.
and I'm gonna put this out there. I don't want to be rude or anything, but it's very hard for me because when I was at Berkeley, I'm work with Kenwood Denard, Terry Lynn Carrington, Omar Hakim, Dave DiCenso, John Ramsey, Alan Dawson, Gary Shafee. I work as a teacher with so many great drummers: David Garibaldi, Mike Walker, Bill Gibson. So for me to find something that's actually at a higher level is not the majority. And one things that I love about your show, it takes one to see one. Your questions, your insights, your it's almost like it's hard to get a great interview with somebody. Like if I go interview a pilot, it's not going to be a good interview because I don't know anything about airplane. I mean, it might be fun, but it's not going to be in depth as the pilot's being interviewed by the guy that works at Boeing, whatever it is. But it's like is a great way to share information because you know what you're doing. But the other thing is because your COSA experience, that's something that if you guys out there trying to get a job in a college, you have to have the background that you have about administrative mind, producing, organizing, and how old is COSA now?
29 years.
Yeah, so it's not about just the playing. You're gonna have to manage things and have a vision. and also surround yourself with people that can implement that vision. When Omar Hakim became the chairman there, we became really close friends, and it was a bit of a challenge to really, you know, translate your vision into policies and actually have people to implement. And you know how to do that. So if you guys out there listen to this, you want to get a gig like that, yes, you have to play, but that's just a small part. I was in the military for 13 years.
And that's where I met you. You were playing with the U.S. Air Force Band
That's right. That's
for
right.
the PAS conference.
Hmm. Yeah.
Seeing you play, and then we met. And I mean, you're a great player, by the way. I mean, what
Oh,
can,
thank you.
of course,
Thank you.
that's obvious, but that's an obvious lifetime of work. But
Yeah. Just for me to interject here, that's another thing too. When I got that gig, I was born in Brazil. I played Brazilian music. I played Brazilian music with a bunch of pop stars in Brazil, and then I play Afro-Cuban music with Xanguito, Giovanni Dalgo, Hilton Ruiz, Dave Valentin, Victor Mendonça, and then I played a lot of big bands. I played with a lot of people that play with Buddy Rich, right? Because in the 80s, it was the end of the big band, but I was fortunate enough to play a lot of big bands. Phil Wilson Big Band, Wayne Oz, Greg Hopkins, Lynn Vivian, all those guys played with Buddy. And then, of course, I toured with the Air Force Academy Band. Then I moved to the South, right, to Mississippi, and I played with Katie Webster, Bill Summers from the Headhunters, a lot of New Orleans music, funk. So I'm not realizing the journey, right? The journey. And somebody interviewed me one time and said, well, I think it was really smart for you to start all those styles. I was not thinking like that, man. I had to pay rent. I had to eat. I didn't say no. I used to lie to people. Do you know who Bob Wiener is?
yes, yes, yes.
So here's a funny story because I was so, well, you and I lived in a time that you could actually make a living playing drums. Just playing, I play drum, you make a good living just playing gigs.
Day and night.
And the phone rang one time, and this lady, I remember her name, Rabinovich. She was a professor at New England, and she asked if I could play a tour with klezmer music. I have no idea what that was. You know what I said? I said, "Oh, I'm all about that. Yes, I can." Do you know klezmer? I said, "Yeah, that's my jam." And then when she hung up, I called Bob Wynn and said, "Hey, I heard you know klezmer music. Can you teach me that?" He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm gonna go on a tour next week." So I took lessons, and it was very hard. There was claves, change meters, changing tempos. Baron Brown was in that band, the great bass player from Vital Information. And anyway, so just to, that was when I got the gig. I still in awe that I got the gig. But when I show up there, they hand me Mike Mangini's schedule, right? And that was the moment. Then I said, that's how they gave me the job, because my schedule as a full time professor was like this. Watch. Brazilian rhythms class, Afro-Cuban rhythms class, big band chart reading, uh, snare drum, because I played with concert band, classical music, and marching band, double pedal, polyrhythm. I mean, it was like a lot of classes, and it was like no problem, because that was the life, right? A lot of guys, they specialize, like when I was at Berklee, I went to John Ramsey for jazz. I went to Eddie Reeby for Latin. I went to Joey Hunt to be, everybody. Gary was already at his house in Allen also, but Ed Kaspic was the polyrhythm guy. But and then you have like 45 teachers, but only three of them are like you. Only three are like total percussion, three or four total percussion. Most guys, I remember when I got there, not a lot of drum set teachers played snare drum. So they asked me, why you have three snares stand up in your office? Because I had a piccolo,
Right.
a soprano, and a few drums. They didn't even know what. So when you're teaching snare drum, you're teaching Anton Ciron or whatever. If you play in orchestras and you double with, there's the musical part of that, rudiments, and I remember one of my peers show up in my office one time because Berkeley has the big glass doors, right? So every morning when I was practicing rudiments, there was a bunch of kids at the door, and then this friend of mine said, "Yeah, man, rudiments such a waste of time." He said, "This guy's a professor there. There's no use for rudiments." He said, "There's no use for rudiments." I said, how many marching bands do you think there is in the United States right now? She said, "I don't know." "How many community bands? How many symphony orchestras?" I said, "There is a lot of use for rudiments, and I'm making money with rudiments right now today teaching it." He's-
No, I mean, I've always blurred the lines, and I was always so curious. I think that's what happens, Enrique, is if you're not curious, you're going to be limiting yourself. When as soon as that curious door opens on you, like you cannot for the rest of your life until you live 150 years old, you'll forever be looking for that other thing, that new thing. Oh, I never saw this before. How does that work? And then you work at it. Keeps your mind going, and also you stay relevant. Also,
I think one of the most important things for me, is that I love it. I love it. I'm 58. Every morning, I already did it. I woke up really early in the morning. The first thing I do is to practice, not because I have to, it's because I can't help it. That's what I do in the morning. I practice. Now, here's something related to what you just said, because I think like you, but not really, because I was when Amar Hakim became the chairman. Him and Victor would start something called the Groove School. They started change there is a little camp right before summer camp, and they combined drum set teachers with bass teachers, which is awesome. And I got a chance to play with a lot of people when I was there. A lot of bass players and a lot of artists. Gloria Stefan, Dave Ellefson, Victor Wooten, Party Tucci, all those great, amazing players. But teaching with Victor was not only great fun, I love to watch what he tells the students. So one time after class, we went to get a bite, and he said, "Isn't it funny that a lot of people practice a lot of things, but very few people focus on what they know and make it better?" So at my stage right now, I I'm not anymore chasing for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next things, because for me, if you really practicing something different every day, I give you an example. I designed one of the most popular course on the history of the percussion department. One is the polyrhythm course, and the other one was the molar course. It filled up so quickly they had to have different sections. And I started learning the molar technique in 1992 with Jim Chapin, and I still practice to this day the exact same thing, and I still think that I'm horrible at it. It's like that's one thing that when I teach on that one semester, I tell my students this is gonna take a lot more than one semester,
yeah.
and if you run to the next thing and run to the next thing, the stuff that I learned with Gary Shafee, I still practice. I was talking to David Garibaldi the other day about this, and I can't remember how he said it, but he said beautifully, because we're talking about this thing where, did you ever experience this? If you practice something that you know for many years, maybe a routine or a piece of music or something that you've been working on for a long time,
Okay.
and although it's the same topic or the same exercise or the same maybe a arrangement or whatever, you can start to know that a little better. It's like a relationship with people. And all of a sudden, you either practicing that or play that song with another whole intention, with a whole other purpose, with a whole other um, benefit, you know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I you get that a lot in the Will Coxon book. You do rental
Hmm.
solos for the advanced drummer. No matter how many times you play any of those solos, all of a sudden you realize another intent or another way of approaching something. No, absolutely. I see that a lot. And also you have changed, from the way you do things or hear things and the context that you're using them changes on you as with age and experience.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. I don't know. We probably the same. I don't know how old are you, but I have a question for you. How long it took you to actually start hearing, right? Because now I can
right.
hear what I'm playing.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a really good question because and that's why it takes so long to go beyond and just so many hours and going deep in that rabbit hole. I mean, I'm all about learning a lot about different things. That's just curiosity. You can't
Yeah.
possibly be incredibly good at everything. You'll be really good at those things that you've spent the most time on, though. And at least you're aware. So whatever somebody else is doing, if I'm doing a classical thing, I know what is going on and why, and I'll leave it at that. And if I'm doing certain things that I really love, I'll go much deeper. And the deeper you go, like bigger doors open, and then you have start having a different approach, a different relationship with that music. And those people who are on that same level will understand that. Because
Yeah.
get
You
that.
mentioned the Wilcoxon. I was teaching a guy the other day, and we are doing the Ciron number one, right? And I could tell he was not really listening to where the phrases are and where they happen. So I started doing that with all my snare drum lessons. I now go and pencil in A, B, and I'll show them where the phrases are. And then he was not really progressing on that. I said, let's try this. I said, imagine that each phrase, let's find the phrase, each phrase is a character of a play, of a theater play.
Nice.
And I can't remember what is that very first motif, I think is right here. The right, and then I showed him wherever that happens, and I said, I want this week for you to just practice those things. See how it happens here, here, and here. It's the same guy. Giving him a name, and just practice this. How about the rest? I said, don't worry about the rest. Just practice that phrase.
Nice.
And then the next week we practiced the other phrases, and then I started to have him improvise with the phrases, and every time he played that phrase was really good because he practiced them separately.
Right.
So when he started playing the piece, every time that the character appeared was the same way because he really spent time with each little phrase, right? And similar to that, I have a new book called the Jazz Coordination Ritual, which is inspired by the teachings of Alan Dawson, the rudimental ritual, right? And I remember this goes to the stuff I was talking to David Garibaldi about. I wrote this thing, and on the beginning, this is just a couple of years ago. I wrote this like when I moved 4 years ago. So when I wrote it, there was parts I couldn't even play, right? I couldn't play it. So I was practicing for coordination, no metronome, and I was just trying to play what I wrote it down. Then I could play it. Then I started with the metronome, but it didn't sound very good, right? Because I was not very comfortable. This is to the topic of don't stay with the same thing over and over and over. Then I could play, and it felt good. It felt good. I could play with a click, but now I wanted to memorize. I want to memorize it. And when I start that process, see how the problems are changing, right? Now I can play, but sound very good. Then I could play with a metronome, but it didn't feel very good because the balance was uncomfortable. Then the balance was great, but I wanted to memorize so I can be paying attention to other things, right? And then when I start that process, I would brain fart, right? I would be like, I would miss a section, or I realize I just left a chunk out. So now it's a matter of concentration. So now I'm still practicing the same exercises I wrote 4 years ago. It's getting better because now I'm moving around. The great legend Bill Gibson is working on this. You know, the drummer from Hugh Lewis and the News. He's a legend. So he's moving around beautifully, moving on the kid. So I don't know what's next, but you see what I'm saying? This is like, if I just play for a month and say, "Oh, I got it correctly,"
Yeah.
there was no depth,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and the other thing, you're absolutely right. And my experience, what happened to me, which was very fortunate. I mean, I was a rock drummer, and then I got interested in this all this other creative music, be it jazz and classical. But I wanted to be like legit. I wanted to know how it works. And
Yeah,
one of my teachers sent me to study with Pierre Beluse in Montreal at McGill. I used to live in Ottawa, and this guy is about. I mean, great drummers, great teachers. These are icons. I spent a year on the first study of Delecluse. I don't know if you know the book.
yeah. It's right there.
First,
That's hard. It's hard.
and when it was about sound, it looked so simple. 1 year, because you're talking about, do you hear yourself? And that's the point. You listen so well that the nuance is, does this sound like velour? Does this sound like silk?
Yeah,
Does this sound,
yeah,
that your
yeah,
sound is your
yeah,
voice?
yeah,
You
yeah,
can have all the technique in the world and play fast and all of that stuff on whatever
yeah,
instrument. But
yeah,
if you don't have a good sound, if you don't have a good voice, that's
yeah.
talent. Interesting.
I have a class right now. Well, on the I have a brick and mortar school, the Drum Set Coach Academy, but I also have an online school, the drumsetcoach.com, and we teach full college classes online. And right now I have 4 or 5 classes. One of the classes, it's called Advanced Techniques, Drum Set Advanced Techniques and Music Application. And I have a bunch of guys in there that are Golden Records, Grammy, touring musicians. And when we get into the high level technique stuff, even those guys on the beginning of the semester, they going on the second semester. Some of them are really struggling with, because they see me playing faster, and they say, man. And then I tell them, I said, listen, we did some sessions where I said, one guy was about to drop out of the class. I'm going to walk, and I talked to him on the phone, and I said, listen, why do you practice? Because we practice, hopefully, to play with a good sound, good feel, good dynamics, good tempo, relaxed. It's a positive thing. And I told him, I said, when I was younger, I was really practicing everything faster than I could practice. I was anxious, frustrated, feeling bad. It was a really bad relationship with my instrument because I was practicing out of panic, right? And the biggest lie on our industry is this: practice make it perfect. It doesn't. Practice makes permanent. So I was getting really good at playing bad, right? Because all I did was like a drum solo for 2 hours, right? So I told him, I said, if you practice with a good sound, a good balance, you with a good tempo, you relaxed, you really practicing sounding great. What is it? Because two things that people has problem on those advanced classes is tempo, is the speed, and the amount of information, the amount of homework that they have, right? So this guy was struggling with two things: not be able to do the homework that week and not be able to play fast. And I said, listen, if you practice just one line of this exercise, just one line, and you practice with a good tempo, good time, good feeling, you sound amazing.
Yeah.
It's slow, whatever. Do you think you're gonna gain more than the guy that played the entire homework, but it's too fast? It doesn't sound as good. It's not with a lot. Who gained more? So Freddie Gruber helped me that it's not what you practice, it's how you practice and why you practice, right?
Right.
So that's a whole other thing. So like Bill, he's great at that, right? Bill plays in class with a metronome, and he can actually go to, the uncomfortable slow tempos. There is a range that when you pass that range, even going down to the tempo, it's difficult.
Of course.
to play. Omar Hakim is a good example. When I used to hang with him, he would play a groove, he would show me stuff, and then he would slow down and slow down and slow down to a ridiculous tempo and was still with the same commitment. I don't know how he does that. It was unbelievable. It's like on my uh, jazz coordination ritual, it starts with very basic beats, and I just realized to play those very basic beats like Peter Erskine level, right, is advanced.
Yeah, of course, of course. Because you have
So
to pay attention to the space and how you divide that space, and to be consistent, you know, uh, and,
do you,
and and for more than 30 seconds. And the intent that you're practicing with, of course. No, no, you're. I mean, you're doing a great thing, and I know you've written a whole bunch of books. I mean, I think what the Brazilian one was, that one of your first ones.
that was the first one who helped. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was the first one who helped with that was well, you got two. Well,
There you
great.
go. Oh, I have 20 copies.
Hey, we gotta zoom another time, and I'll show my favorite parts on this thing.
Sorry.
Yeah, we have to zoom one time, and I gotta show you my favorite parts of that book.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but what I was gonna say is, uh, what's his name? Ignacio Baroa got that started. We own a clinic at the defunct IAJE,
Yeah.
and I was sitting on the back with Horacio Hernandez, Stagnaro, Billy Cobham, Will Calhoun. Who else was there? Shangito, Giovanni. And this guy is teaching Brazilian music, and it's like it's wrong. So Inácio said, "You should write a book." I said, "Sure, whatever." He goes, "I'm going to introduce you to Sandy," and that was a fruitful relationship.
Yes.
He went to the booth, and at the time, Sandy just produced the Dave Wacko DVDs, and then he left Warner Brother, and he became the president of Carl Fisher. And the roster was really small. Was Ricky Lawton doing funk, Ed Sopin doing jazz, Ed Sof doing jazz, Ignacio Baroa doing Afro-Cuban. There was a guy from LA, I forgot his name, my friend, Donny Gromler doing electronic stuff. And then he wants me to do Brazilian. So we worked for many years. That's the guy. I think he's indirectly responsible for helping me design so many courses for Berklee, because he's the guy who he wouldn't get involved with content, but with layout. He was a master publisher, and work with him really helped me to this day how to organize ideas and courses. And I still hear his voice. It's like Alan Dawson and Gary Shafee when I practice. Every time I write a book, you know, I still hear him. Don't do this, do this. Why are you doing this? He was my mentor on as far as design courses and how to present. He had so many great techniques.
Sandy was really brilliant. We actually, I asked him to be on board with the content of the way we designed this video. We did an way back at COSA. We did, because we would have like 15, 20 artists. And one year I said to the people at Hudson, how about we produce a video? And my whole idea was, since we were there, we do master classes, we do classes all day long, and their performances in the evening. So I said, we'll do 15-minute lessons with each of the guys, and one topic each, and they'll do an example in the master class, and then a performing example in their concert. So it was perfect. So it was the first time I had done something like that. So I went to Sandy and I said, Sandy, I'm a person of ideas, but you're the guy who can give it a framework. So he really
That's right.
in
Yeah.
that COSA DVD that we did, that Hudson released.
Yeah. There is so many techniques that I still use. Like my number one course at Berklee was the Moeller technique, and I still teach that at my school and online. Like I'll give you an example of something I learned with him. As we progress on the book, on the chapters, right? I kept the same layout of the exercises, although it's different subdivision, different stroke, because he taught me, like, when you teach in a familiar format and you have new content, the student will use that frame of familiarity to grab on and say, oh, this is kind of similar to the other one, it's just a different this. But when you change the format of the lesson and the content is new, right? Now you have, like, you starting over, right? So he was like really smart, really. Very rarely he interfered with content, but he was great at, hey, maybe this shouldn't be here, this should be here, this should not be in this book. And the $1,000,000 question he always said, always ask yourself, why we need this book, right? So I'm very lucky that every book that I ever for I'm with Alfred, Carl Fisher, Hollander, Berklee Press. Nobody ever said no, because it's like I did the homework. I'm not gonna do something that we don't need it. And thanks to David Garibaldi, because I work with him once in a while, he was so Dave is amazing. I'm sure you know him.
Of course. He's been a
He's
coach
such a
3, 4 times. He's a very good friend. Yeah.
what a human being, man. What a
Incredible player and incredible. I mean, and this is the thing, Enrique, and you'll know this. Guys like him give so much. They've created all of this. Instead of just keeping it under your pillow, they're sharing all the time. They're giving it to you. They
yeah.
say,
He's so humble, and he was so encouraged. He actually called Rob Wallace and said, "Hey, you gotta call this guy. I'm on a walk. I got a call from Rob Wallace." David Garibaldi is responsible for me signing up with Hudson because he was just like so enthusiastic about my stuff, my polyrhythm books and stuff like that. And he's a legend. He doesn't need to do that, but he does. He helps people, and
well, I think it's important for all of us when we have the opportunity to open somebody the door, say, do this, make a suggestion objectively, because sometimes we don't see certain things, and somebody on the side would say, well, look over there, or say something to somebody or to you. Yeah. Think about it this way, and the same thing a different way. So the mindset is very important, and just
That's
giving,
right.
because giving is that should be a purpose.
That's right. That's right. That's right.